The fact is that our relationship has had its ups and downs, and we have often argued. Putin is a more reserved person, and he's right to be one. He often reproaches me. Look, this shouldn't have been made public, put in the public domain, so that it can be discussed openly. I'm more of an open person, as you know very well. This is how mutual enrichment happens. We find points of contact. We always find a middle ground. Whether it's that I learn from him to be calmer, or whether he expresses himself more openly, and so on. We've had reasons to disagree, and these reasons have not gone away so far. We do talk about them. I sometimes even give him an example. I say, look how Americans and Europeans support Ukraine and each other, how they, and this is key, create equal conditions for all countries. Lithuania, Latvia, Americans and Germans are already fed up with Latvia, but nevertheless, they patiently supported as they had agreed. As for us, we still don't have equal conditions for people and economic entities, for companies, even in the time of sanctions. We are discussing this openly, little by little, but we are moving forward. I understand Russia's problem, and this is the age-old problem of equal conditions. We are building a union. We have set out to build a union state. But there should be equal conditions for people, enterprises, companies and businesses. There should be, but that is not yet the case. And this is the main stumbling block. This was related to gas prices, oil resources, access to the markets of the Russian Federation. You remember, now our milk is bad, and now something else happens. Of course, we have had sharp exchanges on these problems. And mostly because of me, this would spill out into the public domain. This was because of me, because our style of conducting ourselves in the political arena is a bit different. For this reason, you shouldn't be surprised that we've argued. I would often tell Putin, I'm sorry, I probably went too far, said the wrong thing, and so on. And we would come to the conclusion that even the Americans and the British couldn't do this, because they don't have the same close relationship. So they can't express their point of view openly like this. But we've never had disagreements on the principal issue. And the principal issue is the defense and security of our states. We've always spoken with the same voice on this.
Have you ever argued during this war about the humanitarian toll? I know you said that you have common views on what started the war, but in terms of the destruction and the level of force being used against the civilian population, have you raised this with President Putin?
Of course we've discussed. Let me stress once more. I sometimes see more than he does, because the war is going on right across my border. I see what is happening thanks to modern means of oversight. I can see what is happening. The reason I say that is I see more than he does in Lviv and what's happening on the Polish-Ukraine border. Even on the borders of Slovakia and Hungary, I see it better than he does, because it's practically on my doorstep, next door. That's why I'm very well immersed in this. And yes, we are discussing this, we see it. And you know, we are always inclined to believe that the Russians over there are like this or like that, there are atrocities and so on. And I stress once again that there are enough atrocities, as you say, on both sides. There's a war going on. People are dying. You understand? People are dying. Which is why the question isn't who is to blame. The war must be stopped. Then we will figure out who is right and who is to blame. You can always tighten the sanctions then. But we have to stop the loss of life. And this is not even in the hands of Zelensky today. It is in the hands of Washington, in London. Above all, Europe does not need this war. Which is why The main point is this. We discuss this openly. I ask him questions. We talk about how people are dying, how many have died on one side and the other. I can see firsthand how the Russians conduct themselves, especially in the north, where they entered from Belarusian territory. We saw them enter. They did not lay a finger on any peaceful people. But there was too much wishful thinking among the Russians. Ukrainians were so kind, tolerant, good, and so on. Somehow they will reach Kiev, approach Kiev, and find some sort of agreement. But then, when Ukrainian airborne assault troops, guerrilla groups, began to strike primarily at not the advanced units of the military, but those who delivered food, gasoline, kerosene, and so on, in fact, people who were half civilians, well then, once again, I'm not condemning either Ukrainians or Russians here. I'm just telling you that there was enough of what you call atrocities on both sides, because there's a war going on, and when your military comrade is killed right by your side, a sergeant, a private, whether he's an American or anyone else, you know the kind of the reaction of the person who stays alive. So you're probably right about something. Perhaps you're right about everything from a Western point of view. But that's not the matter, Mr. Phillips. The matter is that we should stop the war, today or tomorrow, because today it is possible. You know why it's possible? Because the escalation has not reached a higher qualitative level, because Russia has not yet used more serious weapons. And Russia does have them. I'm not talking about nuclear weapons. Russia has a huge arsenal, and I know it better than you. We cannot allow this conflict to move to a higher level, because neither NATO nor the Americans 1,000 kilometers away will help Ukraine by sending old or even modern weapons. That won't help Ukraine. It won't help. Not because Ukrainians aren't capable. That won't help Ukraine. It won't help. Not because Ukrainians aren't capable. They simply won't have been trained to use these weapons. I know how much of it the Russians are capturing. I'm afraid to say more. Therefore, Ukrainians won't be successful, and Americans understand this better than anyone else. Russia, despite all difficulties, is destined to win. So we have to stop and agree. This is possible now, while the conflict has not moved to a new stage. As I mentioned, a new qualitative stage.
So do you believe that, and also based on your conversations with the Russians, that the war will have a diplomatic end? Or do you think there will be will Russia be satisfied with taking parts of eastern Ukraine? And if so, would you support Ukraine losing territory to end the war?
When it comes to the eastern part, that can be resolved easily. Even today, neither Russia nor Ukraine will decide it, but the people who live there. I highly doubt that they will want to rejoin Ukraine. They are very afraid, as they understand what will happen to them. This is why the east of Ukraine, the Donbass, Luhansk, can now only be pushed back into Ukraine, to be a constituent part of Ukraine by force. We missed, as I've been saying since 2015, we missed the moment. This is why a longer period is needed, a period in which it will be necessary to win these people's interest in living in Ukraine. Today, there's an independent state there. They've declared themselves. Conduct any referendum you want, people will reaffirm the independence of the Luhansk and Donetsk republics. We have to agree. We shouldn't push them back into Ukraine. That is hopeless. That will not contribute to the ending of the conflict, but will heighten it, lead to escalation. That's it on the matter. As for diplomacy, Putin and I discussed this subject the day before yesterday. Not only am I aware of it, but Putin told me in detail about the proposals that were submitted to Ukraine, to the Ukrainian leadership. There was no answer. That's what he told me. There was no answer. So how does the Ukrainian leadership want to stop the war by diplomatic means? Apparently it doesn't. Or perhaps it's not that the Ukrainian leadership doesn't want to. Perhaps it can't. It can't for one reason. Because today it's not Zelensky ruling Ukraine. I hope he's not offended by this. This is my point of view. Perhaps I'm wrong. It's you who are in charge there. If Joe Biden says, "All right, boys, you've had a war. As we say in Russian, you've messed each other up. Now let's stop it." Nobody needs war. War isn't profitable. Then everything will be over within a week. You are worried about Luhansk and Donetsk. These will be the first steps in order to carry out restoration and make the first steps to determine where people will live. For Russia, Luhansk and Donetsk are a huge burden. Russia has enough territory in any case. But Russia cannot let Russian speakers be humiliated and oppressed right on its borders. Those are Russian people. I don't know if you've been to Donbass. Go there and you'll see. Even among those who remain, those are Russian people. I know the policy of the United States and I support it in this regard. If a US citizen, an American, is so much as offended anywhere, you throw all the forces of the state to protect him. Why do you deprive Russia of this right? And there was no need to do that. What is so wrong if Ukrainians spoke Russian? If someone doesn't like that, spread the Ukrainian language calmly, step by step. But why do you prohibit people from speaking Ukrainian at the legislative level? Volodymyr Zelensky was unable to speak Ukrainian when he became president. He set himself a goal to speak Ukrainian not worse than Russian. He has achieved this goal. Why don't Ukrainians give this right to others? No, they started to break through the knee. We went through this in Belarus. Belarusian and Russian are official languages in our country. It is fine, we are communicating. I am speaking in Russian. I could also speak in Belarusian. I don't force anyone to speak this particular language. Today, we speak English, your native language, no worse than Belarusian, and we did not impose it. It was necessary because it is an international language. It must be known. The current generation, my children and so on, have never lived abroad, neither in America nor in England, and they speak English fluently. They mastered it at school, at university. The youngest one is studying in English, just as in Russian and Belarusian. Why was it impossible to promote such tolerance in Ukraine? Why did they burn 50 people who thought otherwise in Odessa a year ago? 1 year ago, I think. 1 year, yes? It happened a year ago in Odessa. Oh yes, the anniversary recently passed. Why were the people burned? They also openly said that we burned the separatists. Silence. And what about me? They wiped their feet on me in 2020, accusing me that I killed someone and so on. And what about Macron now? People died after the election. In your capital, people were shot. A woman who went to war for the US. Why is there silence? You know, it's not very just. Again, we digressed. But nevertheless, parallels, parallels, parallels. You were talking about atrocities. You asked me a question, and I thought Americans shouldn't talk about it. Before my eyes, Iraq. I knew Saddam Hussein very well. I knew him very well. Moreover, I'll tell you, in the final months, he asked me to pass over to you, the Americans, through the embassy. I don't want to fight America. I'm ready. Does America need oil? I'll do everything necessary for them to get oil. They need this. I'll do it. He was ready. Why did you hang him? Take the Libyan leader. Take the Syrian leader. And these countries. And what about Afghanistan? What do you call that? What do you call it when your plane takes off and people fall from the fuselage and the chassis to the ground? This is not an atrocity? And what about the wedding? An ordinary wedding is underway. An American drone carries out a strike and people die. They apologized later. But what is the use of apologizing? What do you call that? We're not going to say atrocities or otherwise. This is war, Mr. Phillips. Wherever it is, in Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, in Iraq, and it must be stopped. And afterwards, figure out who is right and who is wrong.
If we could return to the strategy of the war and the future of the war. You mentioned weapons that could be used that you hope will not be used. Do you think there is a possibility, if this war continues and if Russia continues to struggle to take territory, that a nuclear strike is possible? And if that were plausible, is that a red line for you? Is that something you would try and stop?
The use of nuclear weapons is unacceptable because it's near us. We're here. We're not behind an ocean like the United States. So it's unacceptable because of that, too. And also because it could rip the Earth off its orbit, and it will fly who knows where. That is the reason for the use of nuclear weapons being unacceptable. Whether or not Russia is capable of that is a question you need to ask the Russian leadership. But as I already said, Russia is fated to victory. Not only will Russia not lose, Russia can't lose this operation by definition. We should proceed on this basis. What weapon Russia will use, I can express my point of view. It doesn't so much depend on Ukraine as on you, on NATO. You cross the red line there. I sometimes ask Putin. There are deliveries of arms supplies by rail from Lviv, from Slovakia, Romania, and Poland. I ask him why the supplies of these weapons are not being intercepted, which tomorrow will be directed against the Russian people, Russians who are fighting there. He is still being careful. After all, it is rather elementary to end the supplies. He most likely does not want a global confrontation with NATO. Take advantage. Take advantage of this. Otherwise, the military will react, even if Putin doesn't want it. The Russian military will react to echelons of aircraft and other things that supply weapons there. By doing this, you are being drawn into the war in Ukraine. You are afraid and keep saying that the NATO bloc will not fight. It does not want to get involved in the war. You are already involved there. You reproach me for something by calling me an aggressor, together with Putin, a co-aggressor. You have been aggressors there for a long time. I'll share with you one thought that hasn't left me lately. A crazy idea. But it seems to me that if other countries, for example Poland, continue to behave this way, then we, Russians, Belarus and Ukraine, will fight against you together. Because already certain figures and politicians in Poland are sharpening their sabres and are seeing Western Ukraine as part of Poland. The dismemberment of Ukraine is already in their heads. Even the current leadership of Ukraine cannot afford this. Alone, the Ukrainians will not be able to stand against such so-called current allies. Therefore, I do not exclude that we three Slavic people, including Ukrainians, will have to defend the integrity of Ukraine. For me, the destruction of Ukraine and the loss of the integrity of Ukraine's independence are unacceptable. And I will do everything to ensure that Ukraine remains within its borders. That is also Zelensky's vision. So you understand, this unusual, crazy idea that we together will confront the Poles or someone else. After all, for the Poles, who are the Poles? It's you, the Americans, on the one hand, England on the other hand. You took the European Union in a grip and hold it tightly so that they would not make a noise. So time will tell. This is going to be a very serious escalation, so it must be stopped.
Are you surprised at how long the war has lasted? Did you think there would be a quick Russian victory? And what is your opinion of how President Zelensky has handled the war, both internally but also with his relationships globally?
To be honest, I didn't think this conflict would drag on. Putin called this a special military operation. He did not declare war. I know that for sure he and the military did not have a goal to occupy Ukraine or to bring it to its knees. I'll tell you more. Remember after the first conflict after the Crimea, the first clash over Luhansk and Donetsk and so on. Russia was not very involved in this conflict, but then nothing. Putin was offered, before my very eyes, they offered him to make his way to Transnistria from Donetsk and take the entire south of Ukraine and cut it off from the sea. What they are fighting for now, Putin said no, I cannot agree to this. He had plenty of supporters to avoid this escalation. He could have done it very easily in 2015 or in 2014. I was a witness to this, and this time he does not intend and is not going to occupy Ukraine and bring it to its knees. One of the reasons is not to break Ukraine apart, so that there are no Americans, Poles, Romanians in different parts of Ukraine and so on. He does not want that. He wants to see a friendly and whole Ukraine. I fully support it. This is also my position. But it must be a country that does not create problems for its neighbours. That is the purpose of this operation. To be honest, I didn't think this operation would drag on this way. But I am not immersed in this problem enough to say whether it goes according to plan, like the Russians say, or like I feel it. I want to stress one more time. I feel like this operation has dragged on. But this is my point of view on the basis of the facts that I have at my disposal. But I emphasize once again, I am not immersed in detail in order to answer the question as to whether things are going according to plan or not. And the second part of the question? Regarding Zelensky. I have already said Volodymyr Zelensky does not have any behavior of his own. So how can I relate? I would like to see him be an independent person and understand that there is war underway in Ukraine. Not in America, not in Poland, not in Belarus or Russia. He is not a foolish person. To say that he's a fool or that he doesn't understand, no, he's a smart person. But he can't. He can't because of you, as I said. But there are also enough forces internally that will simply prevent him from establishing a peace in a diplomatic way today. This is my point of view. I may be mistaken. But I'm becoming convinced of this more and more. His behavior, I don't know, he needs to be president. It's time to shave and dress normally and to show the Ukrainian people and the global community that every day he is getting better and better. He must get out of this image. This game dragged on. But he's a filmmaker, he's an actor, he's an artist. He knows better, and he is living in a particular situation. I'm not immersed in this situation as he is, so I won't condemn him, but that's my opinion.
I'd like to discuss the economic impact on Belarus of the war, with sanctions hitting both Russia and your country. If the war continues, if there's no end in sight, and this economic pressure continues, what does that mean for you politically? Will the Russian support that you get economically be less? And does that loosen your own grip on power?
You know, by and large, with the exception of 2 or 3 groups of goods, we do not need any support from Russia or others. Although Russia supports us in everything, whatever we ask it for in loans, credits, money and goods and so on. Why am I saying that we do not need support? Because 85% of everything we produce today is needed by Russia. We calmly trade for Russian rubles. We sell our goods there. We get Russian rubles. And we agreed to buy gas and oil in Russian rubles. Misfortune helped where happiness couldn't. We used to buy energy resources in Russia for dollars, but today they are fine with the Russian ruble. So imagine, 85% of all that we export is needed in Russia. Well, in part something to China as well, especially foodstuffs. China needs plenty of foodstuffs. As for some product groups, you know very well, we also find solutions, logistics supplies and so on. Europe and America, let's say we are blocked for the supply of Belarusian mineral fertilizer. Well, listen, in America, they are in great demand today. Prices have risen not only for oil and gas and mineral fertilizers, but also for food. Why are we dug in like fools, slapping sanctions on each other? The European Union has banned our cars from going to the European Union. Then we banned them from moving around the territory of Belarus. We are starting to reload these goods. What did we lose from this? Nothing. Our logistics centers, and warehouse. What did we lose from this? Nothing. Our logistics centers and warehouses get good income. At whose expense? At the expense of Western suppliers. Who needs this? Or Lithuania and Latvia closed ports for our goods. God be with them. We will reorient ourselves to Russia and are now loading, including potassium, oil products. Who needs this? I don't understand why it is necessary for Lithuanians, Latvians and Poles to come to us with buckets, barrels and cans and fill up on diesel and gasoline. It is 3 times cheaper here. Who benefits from it? This is the madness of the politicians. In the 2 weeks of visa-free regime for neighbours that we introduced only with Lithuania and Latvia, more than 19,000 people entered. These are normal people. They buy salt from us. They buy cereals, diesel, and so on. Who have they done harm to? Even in America, it's not easy right now. That is why no one needs this here either. We will survive. Everything that we produce today on international markets is in demand, which means that one way or another it will be sold for the most part to Russia. So I'm absolutely convinced that we will endure. Of course, sanctions are not sugar, not candy, not tea. It's not pleasant, but apparently this is your policy. You are used to choking unreasonably. If you want me to remember an example, remember that Ryanair plane. Why am I not hearing about this topic lately? Why are you not listing it as a complaint against me? But because it was fake on your part. Specialists have figured out that there are no grounds to file a claim against us. After that, silence. And all this will soon be gone. Your sanctions are illegal, especially against Belarus. You reproach me for being an aggressor. Putin number one, and I'm Putin number two, co-aggressors and so on. I just told you that you are the bigger aggressor than me, because you are directly involved through private military companies, mercenaries, weapon supplies to Ukraine. You are bigger aggressors. But you know, as the president of Belarus, I am waging an amazing war. Our military service members have not killed a single Ukrainian and not a single Russian in this war. And the Russians and Ukrainians have not killed a single Belarusian. Strange, don't you think? So wake up. What do you reproach me for? And when I initiated these negotiations, 15 minutes remained. They would have been gone. I called Zelensky. I knew Putin's position and invited them to one location in Belarus, and to a second and a third. Zelensky, as a capricious girl, was against it. He agreed to the third location. For 24 hours, I rode his people by helicopter to Belarus, via America, figuratively speaking. The negotiations began and had a second and a third round and so on. But the Americans didn't like it. How can a dictator organize negotiations? No. They gave the Zelensky team an order not to go to Belarus. God be with you. Don't come. But for some reason, these negotiations are nowhere to be seen or heard. So don't reproach me that I'm fighting somewhere. If I am fighting, then this is an interesting war where no one kills anyone. That is why sanctions must be stopped. Let's live in a friendly manner.
And yet you are an influential figure in this region and in this war. Would you publicly call for an end to the war? Would you publicly ever acknowledge that a line has been crossed, that there is too much bloodshed, and that the Russian forces must withdraw?
I say right now to you, this conflict must be stopped. No one needs it. People are dying. It must be stopped. I know Russia's position 100%. I assume the position of the West. Interests here have already collided, and you do not deny it even. I would like the West to listen. Bad Putin or good Putin, Russia did the right thing or the wrong thing. I repeat, not now. Now we need to stop the war, then we'll figure it out. Take a step towards bad Putin. Take this step. Nobody needs war. It is bad and must be stopped. Have you heard me? I say it all the time, here in Belarus. If I went to war, it would be very difficult for me. Our people do not accept war, including me. I do not want this war. Because, I repeat, now is the moment when this conflict will move to a qualitatively new level. And it will be hard to stop. And God forbid we get to a nuclear conflict. That would be it. So let's stop it.
My last question. I'd like to talk about the situation domestically in the country. As we all know, hundreds of thousands of people protested in 2020. There are more than 1,000 political prisoners in jail. Media outlets are unable to operate freely. In fact, one association just won a UNESCO award for press freedom. But we know that there is a big clampdown on the free press. There has also been a recent campaign against independent trade unions. I'd like to ask you, what do you fear about civil society and civil liberties?
How many? More than 1,000? Yesterday the Americans told me that it was 500. You say more than 1,000. This is news to me. But once I free up a little bit, I'll count them. Well, we'll consider that there are 500 to 1,000 political prisoners in prisons. I honestly can't say 500 or 1,000. This is just a remark. Listen, why are you so afraid of women that you shot this woman in the capital live on television? A rhetorical question. I know you're not afraid. In the same way, I'm not afraid of anyone here. But I'm not going to let anyone destroy the country. Our situation is not easy. You know that our Western neighbors are dreaming of chopping off half of Belarus as it was before the year, in favor of that country. To our south, as you just said, a very acute, hot conflict. It is not easy. I'm just the president of the country. I am responsible for the integrity and independence of the state. I see certain threats. Before August 2020, I calmly looked at these things, understood, and thought that the West is democracy, freedom of speech, and they are bringing this freedom of speech to Belarus. And then I saw how, for your money, they tried to break this country. You saw for yourself how and by whom this blitzkrieg was managed, Associated Press. You, as an experienced mastodon journalist, saw who was managing this through messengers, through the internet, and so on. We know whose money. And naturally, I reacted. This is not independence. It's not freedom of speech. If you don't like something, you shut it down. Neither we nor anyone can express a different point of view on your YouTubes and Twitter and so on. No one can. They ban it and that's all. And you push only one topic, and fake news at that. That is your freedom of speech. Here, a journalist expresses his point of view on Russia in the West and so on. The only thing that is forbidden is to destroy the country. We learned this from you. You also do not allow anyone to destroy the United States of America or England or Germany and others. What is unusual in what I do? We're good students. What is unusual in what I do? We're good students. Excuse my lack of modesty, but I'm also a good student. I'm learning from you. But here, freedom of speech and democracy, which you constantly talk about, means more than the manifestations of this democracy in the United States of America and England and the European Union. So step away from these cliches. No one here shuts anyone's mouth. I have fought and will continue to fight against those who want to destroy the country. What's wrong with that? This is my constitutional duty. If you are going to a railway to try and derail a train in which people are traveling, or which is transporting dangerous goods from Europe to Russia and vice versa, I must ensure safety, and I ensure it with all the methods at my disposal. I will continue to do so. I do not intend to close anyone's mouth. You pressure me, you condemn me, and criticize me. You are asking me uncomfortable questions. I am answering them live on air. Everybody can hear us. What a lack of freedom of speech is there here? Millions of people see you, and dozens of millions will see you and me this evening. I've expressed my point of view. There's something you don't agree with. You are asking me very correctly, but nevertheless ask nasty questions. I take it normally. You're the host today since I agreed to this interview. I'm at your disposal. I'm obligated to answer any questions you ask. You're the boss here, not me. I don't like the Western journalists. I could have refused this interview. Millions are listening. What sort of repression of freedom of speech is there here? Believe me, these independent unions, they are independent on paper.
And yet, respectfully, Belarus has one of the highest highest numbers of journalists in jail. That is a fact.
Well, you know, I can't argue about this because I don't know how many journalists you have in prison in the United States of America, in Germany, and in other countries. I don't know that we have a lot of journalists. I don't know how many journalists, I'll tell you honestly. I will look into it today. I think you're misinformed. When people here commit offences under the law, like in America, only you have tougher laws. If they break the law and come under investigation, they all become journalists or members of independent trade unions, so that you can hear them and then reproach me. Don't violate laws, either for journalists or politicians, whoever it is. The law is one, and it must be observed. Sorry, I'm reasoning according to how I understand it. Maybe you don't like it, but that's my point. You see it one way, I see it a different way. Although, I don't think that what you're asking me is a point of view. You represent an organization, an upstanding organization, and your point of view may not fully coincide with the point of view of your organization. But you ask these questions. I think this is your position. I answered your questions however I could. Always happy to answer them. Always at your service. I will never hide from any questions, even the most disgusting ones, that may not be correct to ask. I'm always going to answer them. We're used to it. We have true freedom of speech.
No more questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to talk to you.